Welcome, everyone, to the PhRMA Foundation's webinar today, Driving Progress in the U.S. Value Assessment. My name is Amy Miller, and I am president of the PhRMA Foundation. I've been working on value assessment issues for about 15 years, so I'm very excited to talk with you today about the work we've been doing here. By the numbers, the PhRMA Foundation has been funding health outcomes research for over 20 years. Since 2017, we've made over 43 awards to value assessment researchers, which has resulted in nearly 100 papers. We've spent about $5 million funding investigators directly in that time. We value integrity. Our awards are made using a scientific advisory committee that is comprised of leading researchers in value assessment and their partners within industry. We also value innovation. Across all of the work we fund, we like cutting edge research. We had one awardee say that she was very pleased to get an award 20 years ago because her research had no home and it found a home with the PhRMA Foundation. She's now one of the leaders in her field. We also value collaboration, diversity, and inclusion. For us, that means about half of our awardees are women, about half of our awardees are people of color, and we very much value DE&I research and do special calls for them regularly. I want to take a moment to thank our supporters. Every dollar that you give us annually goes right back out to researchers. Our operating budget comes from dividends from our investments, so thank you. We fund translational medicine, drug delivery, and drug discovery work, as well as value and health outcomes. For all categories, we fund pre-doc, post-doc, and early career awards or faculty starter grants. In value assessment, we add to that by offering a mid-career faculty grant. And this is a new program for us starting this year. We designed it because this field is rapidly growing. We have seen that companies themselves are beefing up their own value assessment research groups, and they're hiring new graduates at a rapid rate. When they can't satisfy all of their needs for internal staff, they're going to academia and hiring tenured researchers. And so there's a drastic need for more talent in this area. We would like to offer this award so that people can pivot. If they're currently doing an area of value assessment and want to pivot to another, we're interested in your ideas. And if somebody's been doing value work adjacent and wants to expand their work in different areas, we're curious to see what your ideas are. So I encourage you to take a look at that. All of the information on these awards are available online. So the Value Assessment Initiative was launched in 2017, and it was a focused attention, additional attention on this area that is rapidly growing in import. We've offered 15 research awards over that time, and that's about 1.5 million. And we've offered challenge awards. Now, the challenge awards category isn't offered every cycle. We offer the challenge awards when we have an interesting question to pose to the field. And since 2017, we've offered 19 awards. It's about 400,000 total. But I would like to make an offer to all of you. We're happy to offer a challenge award. If you send us an interesting question, we're happy to run a competition and see what kinds of answers we get to interesting questions. So think about it and reach out. So we also funded at the beginning of our value assessment initiative these centers of excellence. So they all competed with others to win a $500,000 three-year award to work on new areas in value assessment. One of the caveats of getting our award was that they would continue to function after the three-year cycle ended. And I'm proud to say they're all continuing the work they started with our grant. Why do we fund the research we fund? Well, at first, 20 plus years ago, with health outcomes, it was about improving the healthcare system at the macro or micro level. Yet the policy implications of value assessment has grown rapidly over time. It's gaining traction with healthcare decision-making and policymakers, both at the little p or the health plan level and the big P or the government policy level. So for example, in 2016, about 50% of health plans reported using ICER recommendations in making their decisions. And in 2022, that was up to 80%, which is impressive growth. The Inflation Reduction Act gave even more weight to ICER reports, but also the entirety of the field of value assessment and the researchers working in this area. At the PhRMA Foundation, we like to identify current challenges and then support the researchers who are looking at focused solutions. With that, it is my absolute pleasure to introduce to you our paper, Driving Progress in the U.S. Value Assessment Field. This paper highlights how PhRMA Foundation-focused researchers are working towards solutions. It also reviews value-based assessments across the United States. And we did it for two reasons. One is an analysis of the field itself, but the other is so that we have a common vernacular about additional value elements or about what the different terms mean, models, frameworks, tools. So it gives us a baseline for which to communicate. It identifies key challenges and discusses where those key challenges are being addressed by what researchers and what research. And then it discusses future areas of development which the PhRMA Foundation intends to support. This paper was authored by Emily Ortman, who is at the PhRMA Foundation, Kimberly Westrich, and Lisbeth Bult, who are at Xcenda. I invited Kimberly and Lisbeth to be the authors of this paper because they are so expert in value assessment. And Kimberly is going to give us an overview of the content of the paper, and then Emily will give us an overview of how the PhRMA Foundation has invested in research and how that has pushed the field in patient-centered directions. There are a few points that I'd like to make about the paper in general. So as you go into Kimberly's discussion about what's going on in the paper, you'll have these top of mind. First, this field is maturing, and yet there's significant room for growth. Two, gaps in the body of research may lead to a disservice to patients if we don't make decisions based on the best evidence. Also, PhRMA Foundation invests heavily in investigator-driven research to address these research needs. But we do need multiple collaborators and additional funding streams to truly address all of the challenges to the field. Next up is Kimberly Westrich from Xcenda. Please take over.
Thank you so much, Amy. Elizabeth and I were absolutely delighted to collaborate with the PhRMA Foundation on this examination of the current state of value assessment in the US. One thing Amy mentioned a couple of times in her presentation is that value assessments are increasingly gaining traction with healthcare decision-making, both little p and big P. And one of the things that's really important as we're seeing this traction is to stop and evaluate, kind of take stock. To what extent are the current tools that we're using for this purpose fit for purpose? And where are there opportunities to use research to improve them and make our methodologies even stronger to support healthcare decision-making? So in the paper, we got to control the slides. There we go. In the paper, we took stock of the entire group of tools and frameworks and best practices here in the US, and we loosely put them into three buckets. One has to do with tools that are designed for shared decision-making between a patient and care team. One has to do with the tools that are informing policy discussions, healthcare coverage decisions by payers. And then that third bucket is really based on the evidence-based best practices for informing patient-centered value assessment. Now, in the paper, there's full details on all of these tools, but for today, I'm going to highlight the three that you'll see in red on your screen: NCCN's evidence blocks, ICER's evidence reports, and IVI's open source value project models. And why am I focusing on these three? Because these are the three value assessment tools that are actively producing assessments and information to guide that healthcare decision-making. So the next few slides all come directly from graphics in the paper, and I'm not going to walk through each of them in detail. I invite you to download the paper and read it and get the rich level of detail and information that we've worked so hard to incorporate into the paper. Now, these three tools that are actively producing assessments to guide healthcare decision-making, ICER, IVI, NCCN's tools, we put them into three different categories in order to assess them, characterize them. This first category, structure, the main takeaway here is that they differ. They have different purposes, different target audiences. The assessment output is in a different format. There's a lot of variation there. That's not necessarily a bad thing. It's an observation. The place where they don't vary is almost all of them focus exclusively or almost exclusively on assessments of biopharmaceuticals. So that's the structure bucket. The second bucket we looked at is the methodologic approach. And again, I'm not walking through all the details on this slide. You can read them in the paper. The thing that I want to emphasize on this slide is the second row from the bottom, the measures of patient-centered benefits. Now, these patient-centered benefits are not always included in value assessment. And when we look at these three tools, we see a whole range of approaches from NCCN, which doesn't include any of these factors in the evidence block assessments, to ICER, which includes some of them in a qualitative manner in their reports, to IVI, who has started to explore where some of these novel methodologies can help with quantitative incorporation. And one of the factors that they quantitatively incorporated in an assessment is value of hope. This slide has some of the other broader elements of value in addition to value of hope. Some examples, and again, this is in the paper, directly from the paper. And one of the challenges with these elements of value is that they can't easily be quantitatively assessed in traditional models of cost-effectiveness analysis. Now, there are some novel methodologies, such as multi-criteria decision analysis, that can help us consider ways to incorporate these elements in a meaningful way. But there are a lot of challenges in getting to the point where we have holistic assessments that are fully incorporating the most important elements of value. And what are some of those problems? One thing, going back to that common vernacular, common language that Amy mentioned, we need clear and consistent definitions for each of these things. With those clear definitions, then researchers can work to develop rigorous methodologies for the collection of these data in a quantitative way and develop methodologies for the quantitative, meaningful incorporation of these elements into value assessments. Returning to our big buckets for these three active value assessment tools, the last bucket that we looked at is the assessment process. And here what I'd like to highlight is the bottom row, the patient engagement in the assessment process. Again, we see variation, we see a spectrum of approaches ranging from NCCN, who doesn't engage patients at all in the development of the evidence blocks, to, on the other end, IVI, who strives to fully embed patients into the process and find ways to partner with them as the process of value assessment is unfolding. So what does all this mean? I mean, if we step back and again, return to that question that I posed at the beginning of my presentation, are these tools fit for purpose for decision making? Are there ways that researchers can help us advance the field and strengthen the degree to which they are fit for purpose? In the paper, we identify 3 areas of challenge that are ripe for improvement and for research to help advance the field. The first area is insufficient consideration of health equity. It's really critical that assessments don't perpetuate or exacerbate the disparities that we're currently seeing in patient access and quality of care. This is a gap that is very much front and center for folks. Both ICER and IVI have launched health equity initiatives. And in fact, IVI just released an issue brief yesterday that I would encourage you to check out if you haven't seen it. And ICER will be releasing a report in March. The second area of key challenge is really shoring up those shortcomings in existing methodology, getting to the point where we have transparent methodology that can support a holistic, comprehensive assessment of value that really reflects real-world decision contexts. Then the third key challenge is this narrow definition of value that so often gets quantitatively incorporated into assessments that can be misaligned with patient needs. And there's a lot of opportunity here for researchers to help advance the field. We've got need for more rigorous methodology for collecting that data in a quantitative manner and more rigorous methodology for actually incorporating that data into value assessments. So these are some really big challenges, but the good news is that researchers have been making progress on all of them over the past few years, many with support from the PhRMA Foundation. And it is my absolute pleasure to introduce my co-author, Emily Ortman, who is the head of communications for the PhRMA Foundation. And I've been lucky enough to work with Emily in both my current and former job. Emily's going to share more details about how the foundation has been working to advance the field with researchers and some opportunities for further trajectory in 2023. Emily?
Thank you so much, Kimberly. I'm so glad you could be here, and it was a pleasure to work with you on this paper. So as Kimberly said, there are some really big challenges that we're facing in this field. And given these challenges, the PhRMA Foundation has tried to take a leading role in working to advance the field. Through the Centers of Excellence, Research Awards, and Challenge Awards that Amy mentioned, we're investing in research on innovative methods that promote patient centricity and try to address these longstanding issues related to health disparities and inequity. So I'm going to walk you through some examples of research projects that we've funded that address these 3 areas: improving health equity, advancing rigorous and transparent value assessment methods and tools, and broadening the definition of value and prioritizing patient engagement. So as Kimberly mentioned, it is critical that value assessments do not exacerbate disparities in healthcare. Previous research has shown that traditional value assessment methods can impose barriers for patients in disadvantaged communities. The foundation issued a challenge award in 2021 asking, how can value assessment methods better account for populations that are typically underrepresented in research? We awarded 4 papers on this topic, which were published in the Journal of Managed Care and Specialty Pharmacy. And you can see the awardees on this slide. And you can find the links to these papers in our white papers appendix. One of the core purposes of value assessment is to encourage the use of high-value treatments and services in order to promote more efficient healthcare delivery. So in a recent concept paper, one of the Foundation Centers of Excellence found that the burdens of low-value care may be especially high for historically underserved populations. The researchers explained why promoting the provision of high-value care and minimizing low-value care is critical to efforts to improve access to care and to advance health equity. Current value assessment tools employ differing methodological approaches, each with their own strengths and limitations, as Kimberly has outlined. For instance, when using traditional approaches, it can be difficult to include the non-standard elements of value or the broader elements of value, such as severity of disease and caregiver burden. The PhRMA Foundation has invested in researchers who are examining ways to address this gap. So for example, researchers at the Center of Excellence p-value are testing a tool called Multi-Criteria Decision Analysis, or MCDA. MCDA allows users to weigh value elements, including those non-traditional broader value elements, so that the resultant value determination reflects the end user's individual preferences and priorities. So this is a more customizable approach that allows for a more nuanced examination of how value differs between different groups, such as patients, payers, and providers. For our 2020 Challenge Award, the Foundation sought papers focused on improving incorporation of patient-centered outcomes in value assessment. The first place winners, Dr. Charles Phelps and Dr. Darius Lekdwala, proposed using generalized risk-adjusted cost effectiveness, or GRACE, which is another example of a novel approach to value assessment. So unlike traditional models, GRACE accounts for disease severity and other patient circumstances to better recognize the value of treatments that promote equity and improve patient quality of life. The PhRMA Foundation has also awarded a research award in 2022 to Dr. William Padula for a project comparing classical cost effectiveness analyses and GRACE. And the foundation intends to invest more in research like this going forward. Each value assessment tool uses different inputs, and some may exclude the broader value elements that matter most to patients. So this can result in decisions guided by value assessments that are misaligned with patient needs. According to Center of Excellence, PAVE, traditional value assessments only include 25% of value elements that patients care about. So researchers at PAVE engage directly with patients to understand their values, experiences, and treatment preferences, and then demonstrate how these elements can be incorporated into existing value tools. So for example, in a 2019 study, PAVE employed a patient-centered approach to assess the cost effectiveness of hepatitis C treatments. And they found that the treatment was cost effective from a health sector perspective, but actually cost saving when including value elements that matter to patients, such as patient and caregiver time and productivity. Center of Excellence, CEVA, aims to characterize stakeholder views on non-traditional value elements and explore the incorporation of these elements into disease-specific cost-effective analyses. They recently conducted 2 case studies focused on human papillomavirus infection and adult early-stage Hodgkin's lymphoma. And they found that incorporating those broader value elements of value could substantially influence the cost effectiveness, though the magnitude would differ depending on the intervention and the disease context. Their results highlight the potential impact of harnessing these broader value elements and the need to generate more empirical data on these value elements. So one of those broader value elements we've mentioned is the value of hope. This is commonly cited as an important patient-centered value measure, and it refers to the idea that severely ill patients may be willing to accept greater risk to attain a chance at a better outcome, such as a cure or extended survival, even if the plausibility of that better outcome is pretty remote. So Dr. Shelby Reed at Duke received a Foundation Research Award for her study aimed at generating quantitative data on the value of hope in cancer care. The study results published in Value in Health demonstrate that it is possible to generate empirical evidence to support the value of hope as an additional value element. So those were just some examples of the work by Foundation-funded researchers. In the appendix of the white paper, you can find a complete list of all of the publications. So to recap the main points, the field of value assessment is growing, but there are opportunities to improve things. Gaps in current tools can lead to value assessment misaligned with patient needs, and the PhRMA Foundation is funding investigator-led research to look for solutions to these challenges. And then the last point we'll make is that to truly grow this field, we need multi-stakeholder collaboration and additional sustainable funding sources. So the foundation is actually one of very few organizations that are funding this kind of research, and we need more investment from other organizations and agencies in this space. Going forward, the foundation is going to continue our investment in this area. We recently revamped our programs to combine our value assessment and health outcomes research work, and applications are currently open for pre-doctoral and postdoctoral fellowships and faculty awards. As Amy mentioned, we added a new mid-career faculty award for researchers 5 to 20 years of their independent investigator status, and the deadline to apply for these awards is fast approaching. It's February 1st. Here on this slide, you can see some examples of the type of research that we're seeking to fund, including patient and equity-centered value frameworks, health preference research, and methods for measuring and reporting novel value elements. And this information can all be found on our website, pharmafoundation.org/awards. The foundation is also launching a new multi-year funding opportunity called the Frontier Award. Some value frameworks have yet to be thoroughly tested and evaluated using empirical studies. And so this award seeks empirical studies to assess whether value frameworks can reliably guide value assessment, incorporate diverse value elements, and focus on patient-centered outcomes. So this award will be $500,000 over 3 years and specifically requires meaningful engagement with patients. So we just opened this award today. The deadline to submit a letter of intent is April 14th. You can find more information on our website, and we hope some of you will apply. So to wrap things up, I'd like to thank the foundation's supporters. We couldn't do what we do without them. And if you have any questions, please do not hesitate to reach out to our team. Again, I'm going to encourage you all to read the paper, which is also on our website. Thank you for joining us today, and I hope you have a wonderful afternoon.